They laughed at the farmer who only bought one number in the grand New Year's jackpot. But when they saw the result, Howard Miller walked nervously through the dusty streets of Oak Valley, a small town in the Missouri countryside. His calloused hands firmly held a crumpled grand New Year's jackpot ticket, the only one he had managed to buy with the last few dollars he had in his pocket. The 68-year-old man took a deep breath before pushing open the glass door of the town's National Trust Bank. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor as he took in the elegant surroundings that contrasted brutally with his muddy boots and faded plaid shirt. He approached the counter, where 4 employees in impeccable suits chatted animatedly. "Excuse me," Howard said in a low voice, taking off his straw hat. "I'd like to check this grand New Year's jackpot ticket, if you could help me." The employee in the yellow blazer looked him up and down, before letting out a loud laugh that echoed throughout the bank. Right after, the manager in the orange suit joined in the laughter, pointing directly at the farmer's simple clothes. "Are you seeing this?" said the woman in the red blazer to her co-workers. "This old man here thinks he's going to get rich with the grand New Year's jackpot. Mister, don't you know that people like you don't win the lottery?" commented another employee in the turquoise blazer, drawing more laughter from the group. "You better accept that you were born poor, and you're going to die poor." The other customers in the bank started to pay attention to the commotion. An elegant lady waiting in line muttered something about people who don't know their place, while a man in a suit shook his head in disapproval. Soon, several customers joined in the laughter, turning the place into a cruel spectacle of public humiliation. Howard felt his face burn with shame, but he kept his dignity. His eyes welled up, but he didn't let the tears fall. He put the ticket back in his shirt pocket and muttered a quiet "thank you" before heading toward the exit. "Hey, old man," shouted the manager in the orange suit. "Next time, save that money to buy yourself some decent clothes." The laughter grew louder as Howard walked toward the door. Each laugh was like a dagger to his dignity, but he kept walking without looking back. The sound of the mockery followed him all the way to the sidewalk, where he could finally breathe again. Walking through the town streets, Howard couldn't get the humiliation he had just suffered out of his mind. It wasn't the first time he had been treated that way, but it had never been so public and so cruel. His boots made noise on the cracked asphalt as he headed home, a small rural property a few miles from town. The grand New Year's jackpot ticket was carefully tucked in his shirt pocket, close to his heart. Those numbers hadn't been chosen by chance. Each one represented a special date, the birthday of his late wife, Martha. It was a tradition he had kept for 15 years ever since she passed away, leaving him alone in a world that seemed more hostile by the day. Martha had always believed that one day things would get better. She used to say that life had a way of rewarding those who suffered with patience and dignity. Howard never stopped believing that, even in the hardest of times. Buying that ticket wasn't just about money. It was about keeping alive the hope she had always nurtured. When he arrived at the small wooden house where he lived, he found his daughter Brenda waiting on the porch. She stood with her arms crossed and an impatient expression on her face. At 42, Brenda worked as a secretary at the town hall and had always shown shame about her father's financial situation. "Dad, we need to talk," she said as soon as Howard approached. "I got you a spot at St. Jude's Retirement Manor. It's a very good nursing home and you'll have everything you need there." Howard took off his hat and sat down in the old rocking chair on the porch. He watched his daughter for a few seconds before answering. "Brenda, I don't need a nursing home. I'm fine right here in my house." "Dad, look around. You live like a beggar. No TV, no new refrigerator, nothing. I'm tired of being embarrassed because of it. My co-workers keep asking why I let my father live in this misery." "So that's it? Because of shame?" "Yes, Dad. I have a reputation to uphold. I can't stand people talking about my family anymore. You need to understand that sometimes it's better to accept help." Howard told her about what had happened at the bank, hoping to find some comfort or understanding from his daughter. But Brenda just sighed irritably and shook her head. "Dad, that's exactly what I was talking about. You keep making a fool of yourself with this lottery stuff. When are you going to stop dreaming and accept reality? People like us don't get rich overnight. These numbers are special, sweetheart. They're your mother's dates. Mom's been dead for 15 years, Dad. Stop living in the past and accept that you need care. The nursing home is the best option for everyone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Brenda stood up and adjusted her purse on her shoulder. Before leaving, she turned to her father one last time. Dad, I'm not going to accept you living like this anymore. Next week I'll come back with the nursing home paperwork. You're going to sign because it's what's best for everyone. After Brenda left, Howard was alone on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. The grand New Year's jackpot ticket remained tucked in his pocket, but now it seemed to carry an even greater weight. Not just the hopes of a better life, but perhaps his last chance to prove he still had worth. The small house where Howard lived sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by a few fruit trees he had planted himself years ago. It wasn't much, but it was his home. Every plank of that house held a story. Every corner kept a memory of better times when Martha was still alive. He didn't have a television, so he couldn't watch the grand New Year's jackpot drawing the next day. He would have to walk to town again to find out if his numbers had been drawn. The thought of returning to that hostile environment made him uncomfortable. But he needed to know. That night, Howard could barely sleep. He lay in bed thinking about the conversation with Brenda, the humiliation at the bank, and what could happen if his numbers were drawn. It was a fantasy, he knew that. But sometimes fantasies were all a person had to hold on to when reality became too heavy. The next morning, Howard got up early, had his black coffee and got ready for the walk to town. He put on his best shirt, the same one he wore to Sunday Mass, and placed his straw hat on his head. The ticket was still carefully tucked in his shirt pocket. The trip to Oak Valley took almost an hour on foot. Howard knew every curve of that road, every pothole, every tree along the way. For years he had made this walk to work on other people's farms, to sell some fruit at the market, to take care of business in town. Along the way, he ran into some neighbors who made mean comments about his situation. Mrs. Gladys, who lived in the yellow house near the road, didn't miss the chance to be cruel. It was about time. You've already caused enough trouble for that poor girl. Good morning, Mrs. Gladys, Howard replied politely without stopping his walk. And I also heard you made a scene at the bank yesterday. Howard, at your age, you should have more sense. The lottery is for people with money to spare. Further ahead, he ran into Mr. Clifford, a neighbor who had always shown contempt for his financial situation. What's up, Howard? Have you accepted that you're going to the nursing home yet? It was about time you stopped being a burden to your family. A man your age should have prepared better for old age. Good morning, Mr. Clifford, Howard said, continuing his walk. And what about this business of gambling on the lottery? In your situation, every dollar makes a difference. You'd have been better off buying food. The comment stung, but Howard was used to it. In that small town, where everyone knew everyone else's business, he had become the perfect example of how not to live. He was the man who could never get ahead, the widower who couldn't take care of his own life, the father who had become a burden to his daughter. When he finally reached town, Howard went straight to the state lottery shop where he had bought the ticket. It was a small establishment run by Mrs. Joyce, a 50-year-old woman who knew all her customers by name. She was organizing some game cards when Howard walked in. Good morning, Mrs. Joyce. Would you mind checking a grand New Year's jackpot ticket for me? Mrs. Joyce looked at Howard with an expression of surprise, mixed with pity. Of course, Mr. Howard, but you know the results only came out last night, right? There hasn't even been time for a winner to show up around here. Let me take a look at that ticket. Howard handed her the crumpled paper. Mrs. Joyce took the ticket carefully and went to the computer to check the numbers. She typed each number slowly, double-checking before pressing enter. When the result appeared on the screen, her face went pale. Mr. Howard, this must be wrong. What is it, Mrs. Joyce? Didn't I match any numbers? It's not that. It's just that... Let me check it again. She typed the numbers a third time, verifying each one with extreme care. The result remained the same. Mrs. Joyce looked at Howard, then at the screen, then at the ticket in her hands. Mr. Howard, are you sure this ticket is yours? Yes, I am. I bought it right here yesterday morning. Why do you ask? It's just that... Well, According to the computer here, you matched all 6 numbers of the grand New Year's jackpot. Howard felt the world spin around him. He held onto the counter to keep from falling and stared at Mrs. Joyce. What do you mean, Mrs. Joyce? The prize is $23 million, Mr. Howard. But this can't be right. It must be some kind of system error. Why can't it be right? Mrs. Joyce hesitated before answering, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Well, Mr. Howard, it's just that people like you don't usually win the lottery. It must be some mistake. Don't worry about it, okay? Sometimes the system acts up, but Howard wasn't about to give up that easily. He knew that ticket was his, knew he had chosen those numbers carefully, knew he had paid for them with his last coins. Mrs. Joyce, I'd like you to check one more time. Take your time. These numbers are very important to me. Reluctantly, Mrs. Joyce checked the numbers a 4th time. She verified each number, the purchase date, the time, everything. The result remained the same. Howard Miller had matched all 6 numbers of the grand New Year's jackpot and won $23 million. Oh my goodness. It's true after all. Mr. Howard, you won the lottery. The news spread through the town of Oak Valley like wildfire. In a small town where nothing ever happened, the news that the poor farmer had won the grand New Year's jackpot hit like a bomb exploding in the center of the square. It didn't even take 2 hours for everyone to find out. The first place the news reached was exactly the National Trust Bank, where Howard had been humiliated the day before. The same employee in the yellow blazer who had laughed at him was the one who got the call from a friend who worked at the state lottery shop. "Guys, you're not going to believe this," she said to her co-workers, interrupting a meeting. "Remember that old man who came in here yesterday with the grand New Year's jackpot ticket? He won $23 million. The silence in the bank was instantaneous. The manager in the orange suit, who had been the cruelest with his mockery, felt his blood run cold. The employee in the red blazer turned pale, while the one in the turquoise blazer started sweating bullets. "This can't be true," the manager muttered. "It must be some mistake." "It's no mistake. My friend at the lottery shop checked 4 times. The old man really did win. And you know what the worst part is? He must remember how we treated him here yesterday." The employee in the yellow blazer immediately picked up the phone and started looking for Howard's number. It wasn't hard to find. After all, everyone knew everyone in that town. She called with trembling hands, mentally rehearsing how the conversation would go. "Hello, Mr. Howard. This is Heather from the National Trust Bank. How are you, sir? Look, I was calling to offer our special investment services. Wouldn't you like to talk to me about some exclusive opportunities we have for special clients?" Howard was sitting on the porch of his house when he received the call. He immediately recognized the voice of the woman who had laughed at him the day before. "Good morning, Heather. Thank you for the interest, but I don't need anything at the moment." "But, Mr. Howard, you need to understand that we have exceptional financial products, returns above market average, VIP service, a dedicated team just for you. Could we set up a meeting as early as today to present our options?" "I appreciate it, but I'm not interested." "Mr. Howard, you don't understand. We're offering first-class treatment. You deserve the best we have to offer. Yesterday there was a misunderstanding. Sometimes people can't immediately recognize the quality of our clients." Howard hung up the phone without answering. Over the next 15 minutes, he received 5 more calls from the bank. Every employee who had taken part in the humiliation the day before tried to talk to him, offering vague apologies and special services. It didn't take long for other calls to start coming in. Brenda was one of the first to call, with a voice completely different from the one she had used the day before. "Dad, I heard the news. How wonderful. I'm so happy for you." "Hi, Brenda. How did you find out?" "Dad, the whole town is talking about it. $23 million. You're rich. Look, I was thinking, how about I come over there today so we can talk about how to best take care of this money? I can help you manage everything properly. And what about the retirement home, Brenda?" "What retirement home, Dad? I never mentioned a retirement home. You must have misunderstood. All I wanted was to make sure you were being well taken care of. But now with all this money, you can hire anyone you want to help you." "I see. Dad, I'm coming over with Greg this afternoon. He knows about investments and can give you some valuable tips. We need to protect this fortune." Greg was Howard's son-in-law, a 40-year-old man who had always shown total disinterest in his wife's family. Over the past 5 years, Greg had visited Howard only 3 times, always in a hurry and always complaining about something. Howard hung up the phone and thought about his daughter's drastic change in behavior. Less than 24 hours earlier, she had been ready to commit him to a nursing home, claiming he was an embarrassment to the family. Now she was talking about helping him manage his assets. The phone rang again. This time it was someone introducing himself as the town's mayor. "Mr. Howard, this is Mayor Arthur. How are you, sir? I heard the fantastic news about your lottery prize. What a joy for our town." Howard knew who the mayor was, but he had never spoken to him before. Arthur was a politically ambitious man who only associated with influential people in town. "Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Howard, I'd like to invite you to a special tribute we're going to hold for you next week, a formal session at the City Council to recognize your contribution to our community. You've always been an example of dedication and hard work in our town." Howard almost laughed when he heard that. Arthur had been mayor for 2 terms, and during all that time, he had never shown any recognition for Howard's work. In fact, at times, he had completely ignored Howard's presence at public events. "Mr. Mayor, I don't know if I deserve a tribute." "Of course you do. You're an exemplary citizen. You always have been. By the way, I was thinking about some partnerships we could develop between the town government and, well, you must be interested in investing in our community, right? We have wonderful projects that could greatly benefit the town." Howard began to understand the game. Everyone who had ignored or humiliated him for years was now interested in his friendship and his money. The change in behavior was so obvious and fake that it was almost pathetic. Throughout the rest of the day, Howard received more than 20 calls. Merchants offering products, people claiming old friendships, distant relatives who hadn't been in touch for years. Everyone wanting a piece of the farmer's sudden fortune. One of the most interesting calls was from Mrs. Gladys, the neighbor who had been cruel to him that morning. "Howard," I was thinking, "you know that fence dividing our properties. It's a bit crooked, don't you think? How about we fix it? I could even give up a few yards on my side so you can have more space. After all, we've always been good neighbors, right?" Mr. Clifford also called, with a syrupy voice Howard had never heard before. "Howard, my friend, I heard about your good fortune. What a joy. Look, I have some business ideas that might interest you. We could get together to talk about partnerships. I've always admired your determination and your vision for the future." At the end of the day, Howard was exhausted. He decided to turn off the phone and go for a walk, trying to process everything that was happening. The change in people's behavior was so radical it was almost frightening. In less than a day, he had gone from being the most despised man in town to the most sought after. But one thing bothered him deeply. No one had shown any genuine remorse for the cruel treatment he had received over the years. Everyone was pretending they had always respected him, as if the humiliation and contempt had never happened. That night, Brenda arrived at Howard's house accompanied by Greg. She carried a bag with some groceries and a forced smile on her face. Greg carried a briefcase full of papers and a calculator. "Dad, I brought you a few things," and Greg brought some important information about investments. Greg greeted Howard with a firm handshake, something he had never done before. Normally, he barely looked at his father-in-law when they were forced to meet. "Mr. Howard, first I want to congratulate you on your good fortune. $23 million is an amount that can guarantee a comfortable life for you and your whole family if it's well managed." "Thank you, Greg. Look, I have some investment options here that can make that money grow a lot. Investment funds, stocks, real estate. With the amount you have, we can diversify the investments well and ensure an excellent monthly income." Greg opened his briefcase and started showing charts and projections. He spoke enthusiastically about returns and percentages, but Howard noticed that all the investment suggestions favored the company where Greg worked. "And there's one more thing, Mr. Howard. I know some excellent plots of land here in the region that are being sold at a very good price, with incredible appreciation potential. It would be a perfect investment for you." Brenda joined the conversation, supporting all her husband's suggestions. "Dad, Greg knows about these things. He can help you make the right choices. And you know what else? I was thinking about moving closer to you, so I can take better care of your affairs." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Well, I was thinking we could renovate this house, expand it, add some new bedrooms, a bigger living room. That way, Greg and I can come live here and help you with everything." Howard immediately realized what was happening. Brenda didn't want to take care of him. She wanted to get close to the money. The house renovation proposal was actually a plan for her to move in and have direct access to the inheritance. "Sweetheart, I don't need to renovate the house. I like it just the way it is. But Dad, with all that money, you could have a beautiful home. You could have all the comfort you always deserved. We could build a pool, a nice garden, an office to manage the investments." Greg agreed enthusiastically. "That's right, Mr. Howard. You deserve to live well, and with us living here, you won't have to worry about anything. We'll take care of everything." For the rest of the evening, Brenda and Greg tried to convince Howard to accept their proposals. They talked about family responsibility, about how important it was to have trustworthy people managing the estate, about how he needed help making the right decisions. But Howard wasn't naive. He had worked his whole life and could recognize when someone was trying to take advantage of him. Brenda and Greg's intentions were too transparent to be ignored. After they left, Howard was alone again, reflecting on everything that had happened. In 2 days, his life had changed completely, not just because of the money, but because of the revelation of the true character of the people around him. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Over the following days, the pressure on Howard increased considerably. Brenda started visiting him daily, always with new ideas about how to spend the money, and always insisting on the proposal to move into his house. Greg showed up with new investment options on every visit, each one more advantageous for him than for Howard. But what bothered Howard the most was discovering conversations Brenda and Greg had when they thought he wasn't listening. On one of those occasions, he overheard them talking in the kitchen while they made coffee. "Greg, he's being very stubborn. He won't accept our suggestions. Take it easy, Brenda. He's confused by all this change. We need to be patient and convince him little by little." But what if he decides to do something foolish with the money? What if he decides to donate it to the church or do something crazy? That's exactly why we need to move in here as soon as possible. Once we're living here, it'll be easier to influence his decisions. And if we can get him to sign a power of attorney, you think he'd sign it? If we convince him it's for his own good, maybe. We can tell him it's just to make banking transactions easier, things like that. A man his age doesn't understand much of that bureaucracy. Howard felt a sharp pang in his chest. His own daughter was planning how to take control of his money. The conversation confirmed all his suspicions about her true intentions. That night, Howard made a decision that would change the course of events. He decided to test how far people were willing to go for money. He would pretend he was willing to accept their proposals, but he would carefully observe each person's behavior. The next morning, when Brenda arrived for her daily visit, Howard greeted her with a smile. "Sweetheart, I've been thinking about what you and Greg said. Maybe you're right. I really do need help taking care of all of this." Brenda's face lit up immediately. "Oh, that's wonderful, Dad. You'll see how much better it'll be this way. We'll take care of everything properly. But I want to do this slowly, Brenda, step by step. First, I want to learn more about those investment options Greg mentioned." "Of course, Dad. Greg can explain everything in full detail. He even brought some ready-made contracts to speed up the process." Howard pretended to be interested in the contracts Greg had prepared. They were complicated documents, full of technical terms that most people Howard's age wouldn't understand. But he read them carefully and noticed that all the suggested investments would generate significant commissions for Greg's company. "Greg, these investments look interesting, but I'd also like to talk to other people, get other opinions." Greg was visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Howard, the financial market is very complex. Not every advisor understands the best options for an estate the size of yours. I have specific experience with high-net-worth clients." "Even so, I'd like to hear other opinions, just to be sure." "Dad, but Greg is family," Brenda interjected. "We can trust him. You don't need to go asking strangers." Howard realized they didn't want him consulting other professionals because they knew any honest person would show that the proposed investments weren't the best for him but rather the best for Greg. Over the following weeks, Howard kept pretending he was considering Brenda and Greg's proposals, but he also began to observe how other people in town behaved in light of his new wealth. Mrs. Gladys's behavior had changed drastically. The woman who had always been rude and disrespectful now greeted Howard with wide smiles and offers of help. She even started bringing him cakes and sweets, claiming it was a good neighbor tradition she had forgotten to keep up. Mr. Clifford also turned into a helpful neighbor. He offered to help fix the fence, take care of the garden, anything Howard might need. He constantly talked about possible business deals and partnerships, always hinting that they could work together on some venture. But the most impressive transformation was that of the National Trust Bank itself. The manager in the orange suit who had been cruel to Howard now treated him like a king. He called daily, offering exclusive services, special investments, personalized attention. "Mr. Howard, you need to check out our VIP program. We have a special lounge just for clients like you with gourmet coffee, internet, television. You'll never have to wait in line again. And the special interest rates, Mr. Howard. For portfolios like yours, we have preferential rates that we don't offer to just any client." Howard began to enjoy the situation. He scheduled meetings at the bank just to see how he'd be treated. The difference was glaring. Not only did they pretend they had never humiliated him, they even tried to convince him that they had always respected him. On one of those visits to the bank, Howard decided to test the limits of their hypocrisy. "You know, Heather, I remember that the last time I was here, some people laughed at me. Was that just my imagination?" Heather, the employee in the yellow blazer who had been one of the cruelest, turned red. "Mr. Howard, that must have been some misunderstanding. Here at the bank, we treat all clients with the utmost respect. If there was any problem, I sincerely apologize. Sometimes people don't immediately recognize the caliber of our most special clients." "So, it wasn't laughter? Just misunderstandings?" "Exactly, Mr. Howard. Misunderstandings that will never happen again. You now have personalized service that guarantees all the respect and consideration you deserve." Howard left the bank with a mix of sadness and disgust. No one had the courage to own up to what they had done. Everyone preferred to make up excuses and pretend they had never been cruel to him. But there was one person in Oak Valley who hadn't changed her behavior after Howard became rich. Professor Eleanor, a 72-year-old woman who had retired from teaching a few years earlier. She had always greeted Howard with respect, even when everyone else ignored him. Eleanor lived in a simple house in the center of town with her granddaughter Sophie, a 12-year-old girl. They lived on a small pension and faced financial difficulties, but they had never asked anyone for help. Eleanor was a dignified woman who had dedicated 40 years of her life to educating the children of the town. When Howard ran into her on the street a week after winning the lottery, Eleanor greeted him exactly the same way she always had. "Good morning, Mr. Howard. How are you?" "Good morning, Professor Eleanor. I'm well, thank you. And you?" "We're getting by, Mr. Howard. I heard about your luck in the lottery. You must be very happy." "I am, Professor." "That's good. You've always been a hard-working and honest man. If anyone deserved luck like that, it was you." Howard was moved by Eleanor's simplicity and sincerity. She wasn't trying to take advantage of the situation. She wasn't offering false friendships. She wasn't asking for favors. She was simply still the same respectful and dignified person she had always been. "Professor Eleanor, you've always treated me well even when everyone else ignored me. Why?" Eleanor smiled warmly. "Mr. Howard, a person's worth isn't in the money they have in their bank account. It's in their character, their honesty, the way they treat others. You've always been a man of character. Money didn't change that. It just gave you the recognition you always deserved. But the other people in town didn't think that way. Other people get carried away by appearances. They judge by the cars people drive, the clothes they wear, the houses they live in. I prefer to judge by actions, by honesty, by kindness. And you've always had all of that." Howard started seeking out Eleanor's company whenever he could. Conversations with her were like an oasis of sincerity in the midst of a desert of falseness. Eleanor didn't want anything from him but a friendly conversation. She didn't try to influence his decisions. She didn't suggest miraculous investments. It was during one of those conversations that Howard got to know Eleanor's granddaughter, Sophie, better. The 12-year-old girl was intelligent and well-mannered, but clearly going through hard times. Her clothes were simple and patched, her shoes were worn out, and her school backpack was old and torn. "Grandma Eleanor, do you think Mr. Howard would like some coffee? I can make it." "Only if it's not too much trouble, dear." "It's no trouble at all. We always have coffee to offer a friend." Howard accepted the invitation and went to the small house where Eleanor and Sophie lived. It was an old building, but very well cared for. Everything was clean and organized, despite the simplicity of the furniture and belongings. During coffee, Howard observed the relationship between Eleanor and Sophie. It was a relationship full of love and mutual respect. Eleanor had been raising her granddaughter alone since the girl's parents died in a car accident 5 years earlier. "Mr. Howard, Sophie is very studious. She wants to be a teacher, just like me. She has the best grades in the class." "That's true, Grandma. I want to help other children learn like Grandma always did." Howard was touched by the girl's maturity and dreams. Sophie was only 12 years old, but she already showed a social awareness and generosity that many adults didn't have. "And which subjects do you like most, Sophie?" "I like English and history, but I also really like learning about plants and animals. Grandma taught me a lot about nature." Eleanor always had a beautiful garden. She knows everything about plants. "That's true. Grandma says plants are like children. They need care, affection, and patience to grow up healthy." Howard spent the whole afternoon at Eleanor and Sophie's house, talking about various subjects. It was the first time in weeks that he was able to relax and have a genuine conversation, with no ulterior motives or financial interests. As he was leaving, Sophie approached him timidly. "Mr. Howard, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, dear." "Are you happy about winning so much money in the lottery?" The question caught Howard by surprise. It was a question no one had asked, but it went straight to the core of his feelings. "Why do you ask that, Sophie?" "It's just that I see you always looking a little sad, and I thought someone who wins the lottery would be very happy." Howard crouched down to the girl's level and looked into her eyes. "You know, Sophie, money can bring some happiness, but it can also show things about people that we'd rather not see." "What do you mean?" "Well, after I won the lottery, a lot of people who never liked me started pretending we were friends. That makes me sad. But at least now you know who your real friends are, right?" The wisdom of the 12-year-old girl moved Howard. She had summed up all the complexity of his situation in one simple sentence. "You're right, Sophie. Now I know who my real friends are." "And we're your real friends, aren't we, Grandma?" Eleanor smiled and confirmed. "Of course we are, sweetheart. We always were and always will be." Howard left Eleanor's house with a strange feeling. For the first time since winning the lottery, he felt truly happy, not because of the money, but because he had found genuine people who valued him for who he was, not for what he had. That night, Howard made a decision that would change everything. He had spent weeks observing people's behavior, testing their limits, seeing how far they would go in search of money. Now he knew everything he needed to know about each person's character. Brenda and Greg kept visiting daily, always with new proposals and always pressuring Howard to make quick decisions about the investments. The pressure was getting more and more intense. "Dad, you can't keep stalling forever. As long as you don't invest this money, it's losing value to inflation." "That's right, Mr. Howard. Every day that goes by without investing is lost money, and the best investments don't stay available forever." Howard decided it was time to make his final move. He scheduled a meeting at his house with Brenda and Greg for the following Sunday. He said he had made an important decision about the money and wanted to communicate it in person. On Sunday, Brenda and Greg arrived early, eager to hear Howard's decision. They brought all the investment paperwork again, ready to be signed. "Dad, you had us so anxious this week. What's the decision?" Howard received them in the living room and served coffee before starting the conversation. "Brenda, Greg, I thought a lot about everything you said, about the investments, about the house renovation, about you two coming to live here. So, Dad, did you decide to accept our help?" "I decided to do something different." "What do you mean, different?" "I decided I'm going to give away all the money." The silence in the room was absolute. Brenda and Greg stared at Howard as if he had lost his mind. Dad, you can't be serious. I'm being very serious, Brenda. I'm going to distribute the $23 million among the people of the town. But Dad, have you lost your mind? That money is yours. It's our family's. Greg tried to stay calm, but his voice was shaking. Mr. Howard, you need to think about this more carefully. Giving money away like that doesn't solve anyone's problems. It's better to invest and secure an income for the family. I've already decided, Greg. I'm going to announce in town that anyone who needs it can come find me to receive a share of the prize. Brenda exploded. Dad, I won't allow this. You're senile and you're not capable of making a decision like this. I'm going to see a lawyer to stop this madness. Sweetheart, the money is mine. I can do whatever I want with it. It's not that simple, Dad. If the family proves that you no longer have the discernment to manage an estate this size, the court can appoint a guardian. Howard pretended to be worried by the threat. You would do that to me, Brenda. If it's necessary to protect the family's estate, I would. I'm not going to let you throw away the chance our family has to have a better life. Greg fully supported his wife. Mr. Howard, Brenda is right. This decision isn't rational. You're being influenced by emotion. You need to think about the family, the future, the financial security. And what if I don't change my mind? Then we'll take the necessary legal steps to protect the estate, said Brenda coldly. Howard was shocked by his daughter's coldness, but he didn't show it. His suspicion that Brenda was only interested in the money had been confirmed in the worst possible way. She was willing to question her own father's mental sanity to gain access to the estate. All right, Brenda, I'll think it over. Good, Dad. You'll see that our proposal is the best for everyone. After Brenda and Greg left, Howard felt deeply sad. The conversation had confirmed all his worst fears about his daughter's true intentions. She wasn't concerned with his well-being, but rather with access to the money. But Howard didn't give up on his plan. In fact, Brenda's reaction had convinced him that he was doing the right thing. The next day, he went to the local radio station and publicly announced his decision. Good morning, residents of Oak Valley. This is Howard Miller. Many of you know that I won the grand New Year's jackpot. After thinking it over a lot, I decided that I'm going to distribute the entire prize among the people in our town who truly need it. Next Friday at 9 in the morning, I'll be at the town square to hear requests for help. Anyone with a real need can come find me there. The reaction was immediate and intense. Within a few hours, the news had spread to neighboring towns. People from all over the region started planning trips to Oak Valley, hoping to get a share of the money. Brenda called furious as soon as she heard the announcement. Dad, you've completely lost your mind. How could you do something like this without consulting the family? Brenda, I told you I was going to give the money away. You're the ones who didn't believe me. Dad, I'm seeing a lawyer today. I'm filing a lawsuit to prove you're no longer fit to manage this estate. Do whatever you think is best, sweetheart. Howard hung up the phone and sighed. Things with Brenda were getting worse and worse, but he couldn't turn back now. He had to see his plan through to the end to find out who in town truly deserved his help. Over the following days, Oak Valley was swept up in unprecedented commotion. People arrived from other towns, hotels and inns were packed, and local businesses had never sold so much. The small town seemed to have turned into a circus, with everyone talking about the millionaire farmer who was going to give away his fortune. Howard watched it all with a mix of curiosity and sadness. He saw people inventing increasingly elaborate stories about their needs, rehearsing emotional speeches, and preparing fake documents to prove extreme poverty. On Thursday, the day before the scheduled giveaway, Howard took a walk through town to observe the commotion. What he saw disgusted him. The town square had turned into a campground with people sleeping in tents and sleeping bags, all waiting for Lucky Day to arrive. But what shocked him most were the conversations he overheard. People discussing strategies to convince him, inventing family tragedies, and planning stories about serious illnesses they didn't have. It was a cruel competition to see who could fool the naive farmer the best. In one of those conversations, Howard overheard two women planning to lie about having sick children. I'm going to say my son has cancer and needs expensive treatment. Good idea. I'm going to say my daughter needs urgent heart surgery. But what if he asks to see medical records or something? We'll just say we didn't bring them because we were in a hurry to get here. Old men like that believe anything. Howard walked away from that conversation feeling nauseated. Greed had turned people into professional liars, willing to invent tragedies to get money. In another corner of the square, he heard a group of men discussing how to approach Howard. The important thing is to look humble. No nice clothes or holding a cell phone. You have to look like you're in need. And you have to make up a story that moves the old man. These farmers are sentimental. But be careful not to overdo it. If the story is too far-fetched, he might get suspicious. Howard kept walking and witnessed several other similar conversations. People who clearly had decent financial means disguising themselves as poor to try to get a share of the money. Entire families rehearsing performances of poverty and suffering. Later, Howard passed by Eleanor's house and saw the teacher watering the garden plants while Sophie did her homework on the porch. The peace and dignity of that scene contrasted brutally with the circus that had taken over the square. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Eleanor. Good afternoon, Sophie." "Good afternoon, Mr. Howard. How are you?" "Well, thank you. And you?" "We're doing well. I heard you're going to give away your prize money tomorrow at the square. You must be anxious." "A little, yes." Sophie stopped doing her homework and joined the conversation. "Mr. Howard, Grandma said you're going to give money to people who need it. That's very kind of you." "Thank you, Sophie. But there are a lot of bad people in the square, right? People who don't live here and came just trying to get money." "Yeah, there are. Grandma said these people are going to make up lies for you." "That makes me sad." Helena gently interrupted her granddaughter. "Sophie, it's not our place to judge people. Everyone knows their own needs." "I know, Grandma. But I heard some women saying they were going to pretend they had sick children. That's not right." Howard was impressed by the girl's moral maturity. At 12 years old, she could already tell honesty from dishonesty better than many adults. "Sophie, aren't you and your grandmother going to the square tomorrow?" The girl looked at Eleanor before answering. "We don't need to, Mr. Howard. We don't have much money, but we have enough to live with dignity. And Grandma always says we should only ask for help when we truly have no other choice." "That's right, my dear. Dignity has no price. It's better to struggle honestly than to live comfortably on lies." Howard said goodbye to Eleanor and Sophie with a heavy heart. They were the exact opposite of all the people he had encountered in the square. They had real needs, but they preserved their dignity and didn't stoop to lying or taking advantage of the situation. That night, Howard barely got any sleep. He was anxious to find out what the next day would bring, but also worried about what he might witness. He had created a situation that would reveal the worst of human nature, but maybe he could also find some genuinely needy and honest people. On Friday morning, Howard arrived at the central square at 9 o'clock sharp. What he found there exceeded all his most pessimistic expectations. There were more than 300 people waiting for him, organized in a line that wrapped around the entire square and stretched for 2 blocks. Howard positioned himself under the oldest tree in the square, where he had set up a table and 2 chairs. On his left side, he had placed a briefcase that supposedly contained part of the money. In reality, the briefcase was empty, but it served to give credibility to the performance. "Good morning, everyone," said Howard, speaking loudly so the whole line could hear. "As I announced, I'm here to hear requests for help and to distribute my lottery prize among those who truly need it. I'll see one person at a time. Each of you will have 5 minutes to explain your situation." The first in line was a man around 50 years old, wearing old clothes and a sad expression that seemed rehearsed. "Mr. Howard, my name is Derek. I'm from a neighboring town. I came here because I'm desperate. My wife has terminal cancer and the doctors said only a very expensive treatment abroad can save her. I've already sold everything I had. I'm in debt up to my neck, but there's still a lot of money missing." The man spoke with apparent emotion, nearly coming to tears as he described his wife's suffering. It was a convincing performance, but Howard noticed some inconsistencies in the story. "Derek, how long has your wife been sick?" 6 months, Mr. Howard. 6 months of great suffering for the whole family. "And what city do you live in?" "In Silver Springs, 30 miles from here." "I see. And what's the name of the hospital where she's being treated?" Derek hesitated for a moment before answering. It's Mercy General Hospital." Howard knew the region well and knew there was no Mercy General Hospital in Silver Springs. The man was clearly lying, but he decided not to confront him in front of everyone. "Thank you for the information, Derek. I'll note your case here and get in touch later. But Mr. Howard, I was hoping to resolve this today. My wife doesn't have much time. I understand the urgency, but I need to organize things properly. Next, please." The second person in line was a young woman carrying a baby in her arms. Her clothes were worn out and she had deep dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept in days. "Mr. Howard, my name is Loretta. This baby here is my son Toby, 8 months old. He was born with a heart condition and needs surgery that costs $40,000. I work as a day cleaner, but I can't save even a third of that money." Unlike Derek, Loretta spoke with genuine sadness. She didn't seem to be putting on a show, and the tears in her eyes were real. The baby in her arms was clearly frail, pale, and scrawny. "Loretta, did you bring any medical documents?" "Yes, I did, Mr. Howard. Here are Toby's test results and the surgery quote." Loretta handed over a folder with several papers. Howard examined the documents and verified they were authentic. The baby really did have a serious heart condition and needed urgent surgery. "Loretta, I'm going to help Toby. You can count on it." "Really, Mr. Howard? You're really going to help my son?" "Yes, I am. After the meeting here, we'll talk more about how to make it happen." Loretta began to cry with emotion and thanked him over and over. Howard felt touched by the woman and baby's genuine situation. The third person was a well-dressed man trying to disguise his prosperous appearance with old clothes worn over his nice ones. "Mr. Howard, I'm a businessman from the area, and I'm going through serious financial trouble. My company is going bankrupt, and I have 60 employees who will lose their jobs if I can't get a working capital loan." "What kind of company do you have?" "A furniture factory. But with the recession, sales have dropped a lot and I can't pay the bills." Howard immediately realized the man was lying. He knew all the businessmen in the area and knew there wasn't a single furniture factory struggling in the region. On top of that, the expensive watch the man was wearing contradicted his bankruptcy story. "Thank you for the information. Next." And so it continued throughout the morning. Howard heard more than 100 stories, and he could easily tell which ones were true and which ones were made up. The vast majority of people were lying shamelessly, inventing family tragedies, non-existent illnesses, and situations of extreme poverty that clearly didn't match reality. Some people went as far as bringing forged medical certificates, doctored documents, and even faking physical disabilities to gain sympathy. Howard witnessed one of the most degrading displays of human nature he had ever seen, but he also found some genuine situations like Loretta's, an elderly widow who needed money for expensive diabetes medication, a man who had lost his house in a fire and was living with his family under a tarp, a single mother whose autistic son needed specialized treatment. What impressed Howard the most was seeing people he had known for years inventing false stories about their own lives. Business owners pretending to be bankrupt, housewives inventing non-existent children with serious illnesses, retirees lying about their income to seem poorer than they really were. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Around noon, when Howard was in the middle of the consultations, he was interrupted by a commotion in the square. Brenda had arrived accompanied by Greg and 2 men in suits whom Howard didn't recognize. "Dad!" Brenda shouted, pushing through the crowd. "Stop this madness immediately." "What are you doing here, Brenda?" "I came to stop you from continuing with this insanity. I brought Attorney Henderson, who's a lawyer, and Dr. Sterling, who is a psychiatrist. They're going to attest that you're no longer mentally fit to manage this estate." The crowd in the square began murmuring worriedly. If Howard were declared incapacitated, the entire distribution would be cancelled and they'd go home empty-handed. Attorney Henderson, a lawyer in his 40s with an arrogant demeanor, addressed Howard. "Mr. Howard Miller, I'm your daughter's lawyer, and I'm here to notify you that we're filing a lawsuit to question your mental capacity. Handing out an estate of $23 million in such an irresponsible manner is clear proof of senility. Doctor, the money is mine. I can do whatever I want with it. Not exactly, sir. When a person displays irrational behavior that could harm the family, the court can appoint a conservator to protect the estate. Doctor. Sterling, a stern-looking psychiatrist, also stepped forward. Mr. Howard, I'd like to ask you a few questions to assess your mental state. It's a standard procedure in cases like this. What kind of questions? Simple questions about awareness of time, memory, and judgment. If you're truly lucid, you'll have no trouble answering. Howard realized he was in a delicate situation. Brenda had brought in professionals to try to prove he was senile, and if they succeeded, his entire plan would be ruined. Dr. Sterling, I'll answer your questions, but I want it right here in front of everyone. I have nothing to hide. Very well. First, can you tell me what day it is today? Friday, January 6th, 2026. Correct, and where are we right now? In the central square of Oak Valley, Missouri. Right. Do you remember what you did yesterday? I remember perfectly. I spent the morning organizing the paperwork for today, had lunch at home, took a walk around town in the afternoon to see the crowd arriving, and at night I had dinner and went to bed early. And why did you decide to give away your lottery prize? Howard smiled before answering. Dr. Sterling, that's a very interesting question. I decided to give the money away because I want to help people who truly need it. Money sitting in the bank doesn't change anyone's life, but money used to treat a sick child or help a family in need can make all the difference in the world. But don't you think 23 million is a lot of money to just hand out like that? Doctor, I lived 68 years without this money. If I live another 20 without it, it won't make any difference at all. But for these people here, a few $1,000s can solve a lifetime of problems. Dr. Sterling was clearly impressed by the clarity of Howard's answers. He asked a few more questions about math, memory, and logical reasoning, and Howard answered every single one perfectly. Mr. Howard, based on your answers, I see no signs of mental impairment. You are lucid and fully capable of making your own decisions. Brenda was furious at the assessment. Dr. Sterling, how can you say that handing out $23 million in a public square is normal behavior? Mrs. Brenda, atypical behavior doesn't mean mental insanity. Your father has demonstrated clarity of thought, perfect memory, and sound reasoning ability. He simply has a different view than you do about how to use the money. Attorney Henderson tried to argue from a legal standpoint. But even if he's mentally competent, this method of distribution is irresponsible. There are no clear criteria, no verification of actual needs, no oversight of where the money goes. Howard seized the opening to respond. Attorney Henderson, that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm personally checking each case, analyzing documents, asking questions. I'm not handing out money randomly. I'm selecting people who truly need help. But you're not qualified to evaluate these situations. You should donate the money to specialized institutions. Doctor, these people came to me directly. If I donate to institutions, they might never receive help. I prefer to meet in person the people I'm going to help. The argument was drawing more and more attention from the crowd. People in line started supporting Howard, fearing that the family's interference could cancel the distribution. Leave the man alone, someone in line shouted. He's doing good, said another. Self-serving family want, commented a woman. The public pressure made Brenda and the professionals she had brought back off. Dr. Sterling reaffirmed that Howard was mentally competent, and Attorney Henderson admitted that legally there was no way to stop the distribution if it was done in a careful manner. Dad, you're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life, said Brenda before leaving. When that money runs out, don't come asking me for help. I won't ask, sweetheart. Don't you worry. After Brenda left with her companions, Howard resumed the interviews. But now he was even more determined to carry out his plan. His daughter's attempt to declare him incompetent had confirmed all his suspicions about her true intentions. During the afternoon, Howard kept listening to people's stories. Some were so absurd they were almost comical. A man claimed he needed money because his house had been destroyed by a meteor. A woman said she was a dethroned princess who needed resources to win back her kingdom. Another man made up that he was a genius inventor who needed investment to create a time machine. But what shocked Howard the most were the people he had known for years who invented tragedies about their own families. Mrs. Gladys, his neighbor, made up that she had a sick son who didn't exist. Mr. Clifford created a story about losing everything in a fire that never happened. Even more shocking was seeing some bank employees in line. Heather, the employee who had laughed at him, made up a story about being in need because the salary at the bank was too low. The manager in the orange suit claimed he needed help to pay for his elderly mother's medical treatment. Heather, don't you work at the bank? How can you be in need? Oh, Mr. Howard, it's just that the salary there is very little, barely enough to pay the bills. And I have a lot of expenses with medication for my mother, who has diabetes. And why didn't you tell me about these difficulties when I went to the bank? Heather was speechless for a few seconds. It's just... Well, at the bank, we can't mix personal problems with work, right? You have to maintain professionalism. Howard wrote her name on the list, but with no intention of helping her. The hypocrisy was so thick it was nauseating. At the end of the afternoon, after listening to more than 200 people, Howard announced that he was done with the day's interviews. Folks, thank you for your patience. I heard all of you, and now I'm going home to analyze each case. On Monday, I'll release the list of who will be benefited and the amounts each person will receive. Some people protested, wanting an immediate answer, but Howard stood firm in his decision. He needed time to process everything he had heard and decide what the next step of his plan would be. When he got home, Howard was physically and emotionally exhausted. He had witnessed a degrading spectacle of lies, greed, and falsehood. Of the more than 200 people he heard, only about 20 had genuine stories and real needs. That night, Howard received dozens of calls from people trying to bolster their stories, offering proof of their needs, and in some cases, offering bribes to guarantee they'd be included in the distribution. One of the most pathetic calls came from a man who had made up having 3 disabled children. He called offering to split the money he received with Howard. Mr. Howard, I was thinking, if you give me about 50,000, I can give 10,000 back to you. It stays our secret. You help my family and still get a portion of your investment back. Howard hung up without answering. The bribe proposal made it clear that even people claiming extreme need were willing to lie and steal to get money. On Saturday morning, Howard woke up with an idea that would completely change the direction of his strategy. Instead of simply giving money to a few selected people, he would do something no one expected. Howard went to Eleanor's house to talk about his decision. He found the teacher tending her garden, while Sophie played with a cat they had recently adopted. Professor Eleanor, I wanted to talk to you about an idea I had. Of course, Mr. Howard. Have a seat here on the porch. Sophie, bring some coffee for Mr. Howard. No need to go to any trouble, young lady. It's no trouble at all, Mr. Howard. I like making coffee for Grandma's friends. While Sophie went to prepare the coffee, Howard told Eleanor about everything he had witnessed at the square the day before. Professor, it was one of the saddest experiences of my life. I saw people I've known for years lying shamelessly, inventing tragedies, pretending to be poor. It was depressing. I figured it would be like that, Mr. Howard. News of easy money brings out the worst in people. But I also found some real situations, people who genuinely need help and are going through hard times. So what now? Are you going to help those people? I am. But I had a different idea. Instead of simply giving money, I want to create something lasting, something that can help the community permanently. Eleanor grew interested. What kind of project are you thinking about? A vocational school here in the region. A place where underprivileged children can learn farming, animal care, sustainability, things that are useful for life. And you would be perfect to coordinate a project like that. Me, Mr. Howard? But I'm already retired. That's exactly why. You have experience, you know the children in the region, you know how to educate, and there's something you have that most people have lost. Honesty. Sophie came back with the coffee and overheard part of the conversation. What school, Mr. Howard? A school where children learn practical things, Sophie. Farming, caring for nature, important values for life. How cool. Could I study there too? Of course you could. In fact, you would be one of the first students. Eleanor sat thoughtfully for a few minutes. Mr. Howard, it's a very beautiful idea, But a project like that would take a lot of work and a lot of money. Professor, I have the money, and work has never scared me. What scares me is seeing children growing up without guidance, without values, without prospects. If we can educate a few children well, they can make a difference in the entire community. And where would this school operate? On my farm. There's enough space, good soil for planting, some buildings that can be adapted, and it's in a quiet place, far from the bad influences of the city. Sophie got excited about the idea. Grandma, say yes. It'll be wonderful teaching children about plants and animals. Eleanor smiled at her granddaughter but remained cautious. Mr. Howard, it's a tempting proposal, but an educational project requires a lot of planning, licenses, and proper infrastructure. It's not something simple to get off the ground. I know, Professor, that's why I need your help. You know the educational system. You know the legal requirements. You know the families in the region. Together we can make it work. And the people who were expecting to receive money yesterday, won't they be outraged when they find out the money is going to a project instead of to them? Some will be outraged, especially the ones who are lying, but those who truly need help will understand, and many of them have children who could benefit from the school. Eleanor spent the rest of the morning talking with Howard about the project details. They discussed physical infrastructure, educational curriculum, student selection, teacher training, and financial sustainability. Mr. Howard, if we're going to do this, we have to do it right. It can't be just any school. It has to be a project that truly transforms the children's lives. I completely agree, Professor. Quality is more important than quantity. It's better to educate 20 children well than to educate 50 poorly. And are you really willing to invest your entire fortune in this? Whatever money is necessary. Professor Eleanor, my whole life I worked for others. I worked for wealthy farmers, for merchants, for bosses who never valued me. Now I want to work for something that will last beyond my lifetime. I want to leave a legacy. Sophie, who had been quietly listening to the adults' conversation, asked a question that deeply touched Howard. Mr. Howard, don't you want to have real grandchildren to leave this inheritance to? Sophie, I only have one daughter, and she's made it clear she's only interested in my money. You two are more family to me than she is. If I can create a school that educates the region's children well, I'll have hundreds of grandchildren of the heart. Eleanor was moved by Howard's response. Mr. Howard, if that's what you really want, I'll accept coordinating the project. But with one condition. It has to be done with all possible seriousness and competence. I accept the condition, Professor. We're going to build the best vocational school in the region. Sophie celebrated the decision by clapping her hands. That's awesome. I'll get to learn all about farming and teach other children too. On Sunday, Howard spent the day at the farm with Eleanor and Sophie, planning how the space would be adapted to house the school. They walked throughout the entire property, identifying the best spots for the different educational activities. Howard's farm had 15 hectares with a main house, a barn, some smaller buildings, and plenty of fertile land. It was the perfect space for an educational project focused on sustainable agriculture. This would be ideal for the teaching gardens, said Eleanor, pointing to a flat area near a stream. The children can learn about different types of planting and irrigation. And over there would be good for the animals, suggested Sophie, pointing to an area with natural shade. Chickens, goats, pigs. The children learn to take care of the animals. Howard was excited about the possibilities. The barn can be adapted for the theory classes. It's a large, airy space, and we can build a few more rooms if needed. And dormitories, Mr. Howard. Some children live far away and might need to stay here a few days during the week. Good idea, Professor. We can build some simple but comfortable cottages. That way we can also receive children from neighboring towns. Throughout the day, the three of them planned the project details. They decided it would be a partial boarding school, where the children would spend 3 days a week at the farm and return home on the other days. The curriculum would include the required core subjects, but with a special focus on agriculture, sustainability, animal care, and human values. Mr. Howard, how many children are you thinking of serving initially? How about we start with 20? It's a good number to maintain the quality of teaching and allow for individualized attention. And what about the selection criteria? Underprivileged children from the region, between 8 and 14 years old, who show an interest in learning and come from families that value education. We don't just want troubled kids that parents are trying to get rid of. We want children with potential who just need an opportunity. Eleanor agreed with the criteria. It's important that the families are committed to the project. Education only works when there's a partnership between school and family. By the end of the day, they had put together a detailed plan for the school. Howard calculated that it would take about $5 million for the initial infrastructure, plus another $1 million a year for maintenance and salaries. It was an ambitious project, but feasible with the money he had won in the lottery. On Monday morning, Howard went to the local radio station to make another announcement. The whole town was anxiously waiting to find out who would be included in the distribution of the prize. Good morning, residents of Oak Valley and the surrounding area. This is Howard Miller again. After carefully reviewing all the requests I received on Friday, I've made a decision that may surprise some people. I'm not going to distribute the money individually. Instead, I'm going to invest the entire amount in creating a practical school for underprivileged children in our region. The reaction was immediate. The radio station's phone began ringing off the hook with people wanting more information or protesting the decision. The school will operate on my farm and will be coordinated by Professor Eleanor Thatcher, who dedicated 40 years of her life to the education of our children. It will be an educational project focused on sustainable agriculture, animal care, and building solid human values. As for the people who came to see me on Friday with real and genuine needs, I haven't forgotten you. You will be the first to have your children enrolled in the school at no cost. And to those who made up false stories just to get money, I hope you reflect on your actions and find more dignified ways to improve your lives. Starting tomorrow, Professor Eleanor will be accepting applications for the first class at the Martha Miller Vocational Academy, which was named in honor of my late wife. More information can be obtained at her house on Maple Street, number 42. When Howard finished the announcement and left the radio station, he found a crowd of people waiting for him on the sidewalk. Most were visibly upset by the decision. "Mr. Howard," shouted Derek, the man who had made up the story about his wife having cancer. "You promised to help those in need. I came from far away hoping for your help. Derek, if your wife were really sick, I would have helped, but we both know you made up that whole story." "How can you say that? I didn't make anything up." "Derek, there is no Mercy General Hospital in Silver Springs. I called there to verify your story." Derek turned red and had no answer. Other people in the crowd started protesting as well. "This is a betrayal," shouted Heather, the bank employee. "You promised to distribute the money." "Heather, I said I was going to help those who truly needed it. Someone who works at a bank and has a steady salary doesn't need charity." "But I have expenses with my sick mother." "Heather, I called the hospital where you said your mother is admitted. They've never heard of her." The lies were being exposed one by one, leaving people embarrassed and furious. The crowd began to get aggressive, but Howard kept his cool. "Folks, I know many of you are disappointed, but I never promised to give money to just anyone. I said I would help those who truly needed it, and that's what I'm doing with the school." "But we came from far away," someone in the crowd protested. "You came because you wanted to. Nobody forced you. And if you had been honest from the start, maybe things would have been different." The argument was getting heated when Eleanor arrived with Sophie. She calmly addressed the crowd. "Folks, I understand your frustration, but think about it. How many of you have children or grandchildren who could benefit from a quality, free education? Mr. Howard's project will benefit far more families than an individual cash handout." "But Professor Eleanor, we need money now," a woman in the crowd said. "And I understand that. But money runs out. Education lasts forever. A well-educated child can change the future of an entire family." Sophie, despite her young age, also wanted to contribute to the conversation. "Guys, don't you think it's nicer to help kids learn important things? That way they can help their families when they grow up." The little girl's innocence and sincerity touched some people in the crowd. Little by little, tempers began to calm and some started showing interest in the school project. "Professor Eleanor, could my 10-year-old son study at this school?" asked Loretta, the mother of the baby who truly needed surgery. "Of course he could, Loretta. In fact, You'll be one of the first families included. And my 8-year-old daughter? Asked the widow who needed money for medication. She can join too. We're going to give priority to the families who genuinely demonstrated real need. Gradually, the crowd dispersed. Some people left still angry, especially those who had lied and had their stories exposed. Others stayed to talk more about the school project and learn how to enroll their children. Late in the afternoon, only those with genuine needs remained talking with Eleanor and Howard. Loretta, the elderly widow, the man who had lost his house in the fire, and a few other families who were truly struggling. Mr. Howard, I still need help with my baby's surgery, Loretta said humbly. The school is a wonderful idea, but Toby needs the operation urgently. Loretta, I haven't forgotten about Toby. The school doesn't stop me from helping you with your immediate needs. Tomorrow we'll take care of the surgery. Really, Mr. Howard, you'll really help? I will, and you too, he said, addressing the widow and the man who had lost his house. Real needs must be met. The school is a long-term project, but emergencies are a priority. The families thanked him, deeply moved. Finally, they had found someone who truly cared about their struggles and was willing to help in a genuine way. Over the following weeks, Howard worked tirelessly to get both the school and individual assistance for needy families up and running. He used part of the lottery money to pay for Loretta's baby's surgery, the elderly widow's medication, the rebuilding of the house that had burned down, and other emergency needs. But most of the investment went toward setting up the school. Howard hired engineers and architects to adapt his farm to the educational needs. He converted the barn into classrooms, built simple yet comfortable dormitories, and created dedicated areas for hands-on agricultural education and animal care. Eleanor worked on developing the pedagogical project, defining curricula, teaching methodologies, and evaluation criteria. She had a clear vision of what a practical and transformative education should look like. Mr. Howard, this school can't just be a place where children learn farming. It has to be a space for whole-person development. The children need to learn to read, write, do arithmetic, but they also need to learn values, ethics, and social responsibility. I agree, Professor. We want to form complete citizens, not just farm workers. And it's important that they understand the importance of sustainability, caring for the environment, and respect for all living beings. That will make a difference in how they live and work in the future. Sophie actively took part in the school preparations, offering suggestions and helping with small tasks. Her enthusiasm was contagious and motivated everyone involved in the project. Mr. Howard, can we have a library at the school? I think it's important for the children to learn to love reading. Of course, Sophie. We're going to have a very good library with books on agriculture, nature, history, and literature. Everything that's important for the children's development. And can I help organize the books? I know how to put them in alphabetical order. Yes, you can. You'll be one of the people in charge of the library. Meanwhile, the town's reaction to the project was divided. Some people supported the initiative and recognized the school's social value. Others, especially those who had tried to deceive Howard, remained resentful and spread spiteful comments about the project. Brenda was one of the most scathing in her criticism. She couldn't accept that her father had chosen to invest the money in an educational project rather than securing an inheritance for the family. It's absurd, she complained to anyone who would listen. My father has completely lost his mind. He's throwing away a fortune on some little backyard school that's never going to work. Greg fully backed his wife's criticism. It's obvious he's being manipulated by that teacher. She managed to convince him to spend everything on a project that's only going to benefit her. We should have gotten him committed when we tried. Now it's too late. The money is already being spent. Brenda, maybe we can still do something. If we can prove that the teacher is taking advantage of his good faith. You're right, Greg. Let's properly look into this story. There's something strange about this sudden friendship between them. Brenda and Greg began spreading rumors that Eleanor was taking advantage of Howard to get her hands on his money. They hinted that the teacher had psychologically manipulated the farmer to gain access to his assets. The rumors reached Eleanor's ears, and she was deeply hurt by the accusations. She went to Howard to talk about the situation. Mr. Howard, I've heard about the comments your daughter has been making about me. Maybe it's better if I step away from the project so I don't cause you any trouble." "Professor Eleanor, you're not stepping away from anything. Brenda is angry because she didn't get her hands on my money. Her criticism has nothing to do with you or the project, but people might believe that I'm taking advantage of your kindness. Those who truly know you know that's not true, and those who don't know you don't matter. What matters is making this project succeed. Still, I'm worried about the family conflicts this is causing. Professor Eleanor, I had already lost my daughter long before I won the jackpot. He lost her on the day she chose to be ashamed of me instead of supporting me. The money only revealed what she always was, a self-serving person with no character." The conversation reassured Eleanor, but she remained concerned about the social consequences of the project. She knew that in a small town, rumors could seriously damage the school's credibility. To combat the malicious gossip, Eleanor decided to be completely transparent with the community. She organized public meetings where she explained in detail what the project would look like, what the educational goals were, and how the finances would be managed. "Folks, I want to make one thing very clear. I will not receive a single cent more than my teacher's salary. All of Mr. Howard's money is being invested in the physical structure, equipment, teaching materials, and other school costs. There is no personal benefit for me other than the satisfaction of contributing to our children's education. And to guarantee full transparency, we will have a public financial report every 3 months. All expenses will be documented and made available for anyone interested to review." Eleanor's transparency and honesty gradually won over the community's support. Even some people who were initially skeptical began to support the project once they understood its goals and methodology better. 3 months after the school's announcement, the Martha Miller Vocational Academy was ready to welcome its first class of students. Howard and Eleanor had worked intensively to create a quality educational structure. The school featured 4 classrooms, a library, a basic science lab, dormitories for 20 children, a cafeteria, 2 hectares of educational farmland, space for raising animals, a basic woodworking shop, and a small industrial kitchen. The pedagogical project was innovative for the region. It combined the mandatory official curriculum with practical activities in agriculture, animal care, environmental sustainability, and ethical values education. The children spent 3 days a week at the school, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and went home the other days. Eleanor hired 3 specialized teachers to help with the different subjects. All were experienced women committed to transformative education. "Our goal is not just to train farm workers," Eleanor explained to the teachers. "We want to form critical, responsible, ethical citizens. Agriculture is a means, not an end. The children need to learn that work is dignified, that sustainability is fundamental to the planet's future, and that education is the best inheritance they can receive." For the selection of the first 20 students, Eleanor and Howard personally visited the interested families. They wanted to know each child's home environment and explain in detail how the project would work. The selection criteria included the family's socio-economic situation, the child's genuine interest in participating, parental support for the educational project, age between 8 and 14, and residence in the region. Loretta was one of the first mothers to enroll her oldest son in the school. "Teacher Eleanor, ever since Mr. Howard saved my baby's life, I trust your project completely. My son Caleb is going to have opportunities I never had." The widow who needed help with medications also enrolled her granddaughter. "It's a blessing to have a school like this in our region. My granddaughter Haley is very smart, but I couldn't afford to give her a better education." The man who had lost his house in the fire enrolled 2 daughters. "Your daughters will have everything they need here," Eleanor assured him. "Quality education, nutritious meals, a safe environment to learn and grow." On the school's opening day, Howard's farm turned into a celebration. Hundreds of people from the region came to see the project and honor the first class of students. Howard gave an emotional speech to mark the school's official opening. "When I won the lottery, a lot of people laughed at me. They said I didn't deserve that money, that people like me didn't get rich. Maybe they were right. I really don't deserve to be rich while so many children grow up without opportunities. That's why I decided to use this luck to create something that will last much longer than any personal fortune." This school will educate hundreds of children over the years, and every well-educated child has the potential to transform an entire family. This isn't my school. It's our community's school. It's where we'll shape the future leaders of our region. It's where we'll prove that education is the true wealth. Eleanor also spoke to the audience, explaining the school's educational philosophy. Here, our children will learn that knowledge is power. They'll learn that work brings dignity. They'll learn that caring for nature is caring for the future. They'll learn that being honest and ethical is more important than being rich. This school is a dream coming true, thanks to Mr. Howard's generosity and the support of the entire community. But the project's success depends on all of us. Sophie, now one of the school's students, also wanted to speak. I want to thank Mr. Howard for creating this beautiful school. Now I can learn all about plants and animals. I can read books every day. And I can help other children too. That's what I've always wanted to do. The inauguration ceremony was moving. The 20 children in the first class performed a song about the importance of education and caring for nature. Many adults cried with emotion, seeing the enthusiasm and hope in the children's eyes. Not everyone was happy with the school's success. Brenda watched the ceremony from a distance, with a bitter expression on her face. Seeing her father applauded and recognized by the community only intensified her frustration. "Greg, I can't stand watching my father act like a saint anymore. Everyone thinks he's a hero, when in fact he's throwing away the family inheritance. Take it easy, Brenda. This project won't last long. A school out in the sticks is never going to work. Pretty soon they'll realize it was a mistake." "You really think so?" "I'm sure of it. And when that happens, your father will be left without money and without options. Then he'll have to accept our help." But Greg was wrong. The Martha Miller Vocational Academy started working better than anyone could have imagined. The children quickly adapted to the routine of studies and hands-on activities. The academic results were excellent from the very first semester. More important than the academic results was the transformation in the children's behavior. They developed discipline, responsibility, cooperation, and a genuine love for learning. Parents began to notice positive changes in their children's behavior at home. Caleb, Loretta's son, who used to be a shy and insecure child, became a confident and outgoing boy. Haley, the widow's granddaughter, discovered a passion for reading and began helping other children with literacy difficulties. The hands-on farming activities became the highlight of the project. The children learned to plant vegetables, care for fruit trees, and raise chickens and goats. But more than farming techniques, they learned about responsibility, patience, and care for all living beings. Eleanor created a system where each child was responsible for a specific part of the farm. Some tended the vegetable garden, others the animals, and others the ornamental garden. This individual responsibility within a collective project developed in the children a sense of belonging and commitment. Howard actively participated in the school's educational activities. Even though he had no formal teaching background, he taught the children traditional farming techniques, practical knowledge about nature, and above all the life values he had learned throughout his 68 years. "Children, the land doesn't lie," Howard used to say during the practical lessons. "If you plant with care and tend to it well, it will always bear fruit. If you're careless or lazy, it won't produce a thing. It's the same in life. Those who work honestly are always rewarded." The children loved the stories Howard told about his life, his work on other people's farms, his financial struggles, and how he learned that true wealth isn't in money. "Mr. Howard, were you poor before you won the lottery?" a child asked during a lesson on planting corn. "Yes, I was, son. Very poor. Sometimes I didn't even have money to buy food." "And were you sad because you were poor?" "Sometimes I was sad, especially when people treated me badly because of it, but I never lost hope. I always believed that one day things would get better." "And now are you happy because you're rich?" Howard smiled before answering. "You know, son, I discovered that happiness doesn't come from money. It comes from doing good, from having real friends, from seeing children like you learning and growing. When I was poor and saw a child smiling, I was happy. Now that I have money and I see you all learning here at school, I'm even happier." These simple yet profound conversations left a deep mark on the children. They began to understand that a person's worth isn't in what they own, but in the good they do for others. At the end of the first year, the school organized a fair where the children could showcase everything they had learned. They sold the vegetables they had planted, eggs from the chickens they cared for, homemade sweets they had learned to make, and crafts made from recycled materials. The fair was an absolute success. People from several towns in the region came to see the children's work and buy their products. More important than the money raised was the pride and self-esteem the children showed as they explained their activities. "These carrots were planted by me and Haley," Caleb explained to a visitor. "We took care of them every day, watered them, pulled out the weeds. They came out really tasty. Want to try one?" "These eggs are from our chickens," Sophie said proudly. "We feed them in the morning and in the afternoon, clean the coop, and take care of them when they get sick. They're fresh eggs, nice and yellow." The quality of the products impressed even skeptical people who had come only to criticize. It was impossible to deny that the children were truly learning and developing valuable practical skills. The fair's success caught the attention of regional journalists who did stories about the school. The positive buzz attracted visitors from other towns and even other states, interested in learning about the innovative educational project. "How did the idea of creating this school come about?" a journalist asked during an interview with Howard. "Well, when I won the lottery, I saw how people changed toward me. Everyone wanted to take advantage of my money. That made me think that the problem wasn't people's poverty, but the lack of education and values. So I thought, instead of giving money to a few, why not create an opportunity to educate many? And why this methodology that combines traditional teaching with practical activities? Because children learn better by doing, and because I believe all education has to prepare you for real life. Knowing math is no use if you don't know how to manage money. Knowing science is no use if you don't know how to care for nature. Here the children learn everything together. Do you have plans to expand the project?" "Yes, we're already getting requests from other regions, but we're going to grow slowly, always maintaining quality. It's better to have one excellent school than 10 mediocre ones." The news stories about the school brought more recognition, but also more criticism from the envious. Brenda became even more outraged seeing her father being interviewed on television as if he were a celebrity. "Greg, I can't take this anymore. Everyone praising my father, saying he's a role model. They forgot he abandoned his own family to play philanthropist. Brenda, maybe it's time for us to change our strategy. Instead of criticizing the project, how about we try to get close to him again?" "What do you mean?" "The school is working out, right? It's bringing recognition and prestige. If we can get involved in the project, we can benefit from it. Maybe even land some administrative position." "Greg, do you really think my father would accept our help after everything we've said about him? Worth a try. After all, we're family, and family always forgives, right?" In truth, Howard had forgiven Brenda long before she asked, not because of the blood that bound them, but because anger and resentment are feelings that harm the ones who carry them. Howard had learned that forgiving doesn't mean taking someone back. It just means letting go of the hurt. When Brenda finally reached out to her father for a conversation, he received her politely, but with his guard up. "Hi, Dad. I came here to talk to you." "Hi, Brenda. Have a seat. Want some coffee?" "Yes, please, Dad. I came here to apologize. I think I was wrong about your decision with the lottery money." "I see. Back then I was worried about your financial security. I thought you were being too generous and might regret it later. But seeing the success of the school, I realize you made the right choice." Howard listened to everything without showing any emotion. He knew Brenda all too well to believe in such a sudden change of behavior. "Brenda, thank you for the apology. I accept it." "That's great, Dad. And look, I was thinking, maybe I could help out somehow with the school. I have administrative experience. I can handle the paperwork, the accounts. Brenda, the administrative side is already being very well handled by Mrs. Eleanor. She has full control of the situation." "But Dad, wouldn't it be better to have someone from the family involved? To make sure your interests are being protected?" Howard immediately noticed Brenda's hidden intentions. She wanted to insert herself into the project to gain access to the financial information and maybe find a way to benefit herself. "Brenda, I don't need protection. Eleanor is someone I trust completely." "But Dad, what if something happens to you? Who's going to take care of the school? It's important to have someone from the family prepared to take on that responsibility. The school has its own legal structure. If something happens to me, it keeps operating normally. Brenda grew frustrated when she realized her father had legally shielded himself. There would be no opening for her to interfere in the project or try to control the resources. Dad, I'm just thinking about what's best for you. Family is family, right? We should be together in these important decisions. Brenda, family isn't just about blood. It's about being there, supporting each other, standing together through hard times. When I needed my family the most, they tried to put me in a nursing home. When I won the lottery, they tried to have me declared incompetent so they could control my money. Where was the family in those moments? Brenda couldn't answer. Her father's words were blunt and painful, but true. She really had abandoned any family consideration when it came to money. Dad, I know I made mistakes, but now I want to make things right. I want to be part of your life again. Brenda, you can always be part of my life, but as a daughter, not as a partner or manager. If you want to visit me, talk, have lunch together sometimes, you'll always be welcome. But the school's business stays with those who have the competence and honesty to handle it. The conversation made it clear that Howard was not interested in involving Brenda in the financial or administrative aspects of the school. He had forgiven her as a father, but he did not trust her as a business partner. Brenda left her father's house even more frustrated. Her attempt to get closer had failed completely, and she realized there would be no way to gain access to the school's resources. During the second year of the school's operation, the project continued to evolve and improve. Eleanor introduced new educational activities, expanded the library, and established partnerships with universities to bring in researchers who could teach more advanced agricultural techniques. The number of applicants for the school's openings grew exponentially. Families from all over the region wanted to enroll their children in the project. Eleanor and Howard had to create stricter selection criteria to maintain the quality of education. Mr. Howard, I think it's time we considered expanding. The demand is very high, and we're turning away children who would truly benefit from the project. Professor Eleanor, I think about that every day too, but I'm afraid of growing too fast and losing quality. What if we expand gradually? 10 more openings this year, 10 more next year. That way we can maintain our quality standard. Good idea. And we could also think about creating a teacher training program, teaching our methodology to other educators who want to apply it in their regions. The idea of training other educators in the school's methodology became one of the most important projects of the second year. Eleanor developed an intensive course for teachers in the region, teaching how to combine traditional education with practical activities and character development. The first teacher training course was a success. 20 educators from different towns participated in the program and left equipped to apply the methodology in their own schools. The goal isn't for everyone to copy exactly what we do here, Eleanor explained to the teachers in training. It's for each one to adapt our methodology to the reality of their region and their children. The important thing is to stay focused on comprehensive education and character development. One of the teachers participating in the course came from a town 200 miles away. Professor Eleanor, our region is more industrial than agricultural. How can we adapt these practical activities? You can create workshops in woodworking, basic electronics, sewing, cooking. The important thing isn't agriculture itself. It's giving children the opportunity to learn by doing, to develop practical skills and a sense of responsibility. The adaptations of the methodology to different realities became one of the richest aspects of the project. Each school that adopted the principles of the Martha Miller Vocational Academy created its own practical activities suited to the local context. By the third year, the school was already recognized as a national reference in rural education. Delegations from other states came to see the project, universities developed research on the methodology, and the Ministry of Education expressed interest in studying the possibility of including elements of the proposal in national curriculum guidelines. Howard, now 71 years old, felt more fulfilled than ever before in his life. Seeing hundreds of children benefiting from the project he had created was more rewarding than any material wealth could ever be. Professor Eleanor, when I bought that grand New Year's jackpot ticket, I never imagined it would bring me so much happiness. Why, Mr. Howard? Weren't you happy when you won? At first I thought I'd be happy, but the money only brought me problems. Fake people, self-interested family, expectations I didn't know how to meet. The happiness came when I decided to use the money for something bigger than myself. Do you regret anything? I regret not discovering the transformative power of education sooner. If I had known that when I was young, maybe I would have made different choices in life. But Mr. Howard, you needed to live through everything you did to get here. Your experiences of poverty, humiliation, and hardship are what give your project authenticity. The children can feel that you understand their reality. Maybe so, Professor. Perhaps everything was necessary to get to this moment. In the 4th year of the school, something happened that filled Howard with pride. The school's first students took their college entrance exams, and several were accepted into public universities. Caleb, Loretta's son, got into agronomy. Haley, the widow's granddaughter, was accepted into education. Sophie, even though she was still a teenager, was already showing interest in following in her grandmother's footsteps to become a teacher. Mr. Howard, I really want to study agronomy and then come back and work here at the school, Caleb said during the first class's graduation celebration. I want to help other kids the same way you helped me. Caleb, that makes me very happy. The school will always be here waiting for you to come back. Do you have any plans to retire someday? Howard laughed at the question. Caleb, I retired when I won the lottery. Everything I do now is out of pleasure, not obligation. As long as I have my health and my energy, I'll keep working here with all of you. The first class's graduation ceremony was moving. 20 young people between 16 and 18 years old were saying goodbye to the school that had transformed their lives, but they promised to stay in touch and contribute to the project whenever possible. Eleanor gave a speech that captured the spirit of the school. You're not just graduating as students. You're graduating as aware citizens, dignified workers, ethical people. You'll carry with you the values you learned here: honesty, responsibility, respect for nature, love of hard work, and solidarity with those in need. But remember, education isn't a diploma you receive. It's a process that lasts a lifetime. Keep learning, keep growing, keep being people who make a difference in the world. Howard also spoke to the graduates. When I was young like you, I didn't have the opportunities you had, but that didn't make me give up on my dreams. I worked my whole life with honesty. I kept my dignity even in the toughest moments, and in the end I was rewarded in a way I never imagined. You have far more tools than I had. Use those tools to build a life that makes you proud, but also to help those in need. Knowledge that isn't shared becomes useless. After the graduation, many alumni stayed in touch with the school. Some came back during breaks to help with activities. Others sent money to contribute to specific projects. The school had created a network of solidarity that expanded every year. In the 5th year, the school received a proposal that surprised even Howard. An international foundation offered $5 million to expand the project to other Latin American countries. Mr. Howard, it's a tempting proposal, Eleanor said during a meeting to discuss the offer. We could take our methodology to Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador. Imagine how many children we could benefit. Professor Eleanor, it really is an incredible opportunity. But I'm afraid that we might grow too much and lose our essence. Here at our school, I know every child by name. I know the difficulties of each family. I can personally follow the development of each student. What if we created a structure that maintained that closeness? Each new school would be small, with at most 50 students, and would have full autonomy to adapt the methodology to the local reality. That makes sense, as long as we keep the focus on quality, not quantity. The discussion about international expansion lasted months. Howard and Eleanor visited some schools in other countries to better understand the challenges of rural education in Latin America. They were struck by the similarities among the problems faced by poor children in different countries. Mr. Howard, I think we have a social responsibility to share what we've learned, said Eleanor after a visit to Peru. If our methodology can help American children, It can help children anywhere. I agree, Professor, but let's do this right. With planning, with competent local partners, with constant quality monitoring. The decision was to accept the International Foundation's proposal, but under strict conditions. Each new school would be implemented gradually, with direct supervision from the American team during the first 2 years, and with constant outcome assessments. The first international project was implemented in a rural community in Peru. Eleanor and 2 teachers from the American school spent 6 months there, working with local educators to adapt the methodology to the Peruvian reality. "It's impressive how similar the challenges are," commented Eleanor during a call to Howard. "Poor children, families without prospects, young people migrating to the cities for lack of opportunities in rural areas. Our methodology adapts perfectly here." The success of the project in Peru led to invitations to implement similar schools in Bolivia and Ecuador. Within 3 years, the Martha Miller Vocational Academy methodology was being applied in 12 schools across 4 countries. Howard, now 75 years old, had become an internationally respected figure in the field of rural education. He received invitations to give lectures, took part in education conferences, and was consulted by international organizations. But what made him proudest was not the international recognition. It was being able to visit the original school and see hundreds of former students who had become successful and ethical adults. Caleb had earned a degree in agronomy and returned to work at the school as a teacher of agricultural techniques. Haley earned a degree in education and took over one of the classrooms. Sophie, now 24 years old, had become the school's pedagogical coordinator. "Mr. Howard, sometimes I think about what my life would be like if you hadn't created this school," said Sophie during a Sunday lunch. "I'd probably be just another young woman without prospects, trying to find a job in the city." "Sophie, you were always special. With or without the school, you would have found a good path in life." "I'm not so sure, Mr. Howard. Here I learned things I wouldn't have learned anywhere else. I learned that education is much more than memorizing subjects. I learned that teaching is an act of love. I learned that every child has a unique potential that needs to be discovered and developed. And now, you're passing all of that on to a new generation of children. That's how good things perpetuate themselves." The conversation with Sophie brought an important reflection to Howard. He realized he had created much more than a school. He had created an educational movement that constantly renewed itself through the very former students who returned as educators. The Martha Miller Vocational Academy had become self-sustaining not only financially, but also pedagogically. The former students themselves were the best ambassadors of the methodology, carrying the values they had learned wherever they went. At that moment, at 75 years old, Howard realized he had achieved something few millionaires achieve: immortality through legacy. Even when he was no longer around, the school would keep operating, educating children, shaping ethical citizens, transforming communities. On a Sunday afternoon, while walking through the farm, watching the children play during recess, Howard received an unexpected visit. Brenda showed up accompanied by a little girl of about 8 years old. "Hi, Dad. This is Julia, my granddaughter. Your great-granddaughter." Howard was surprised. He didn't know Brenda had a granddaughter. "Hi, Julia. Nice to meet you." The girl was shy but polite. "Hi, Great-Grandpa. My mom said you have a really cool school here." "I sure do, Julia. Do you want to take a tour?" As Howard showed Julia around the school, Brenda followed in silence. For the first time in years, she seemed genuinely impressed by what her father had built. "Dad, I want to apologize. For real this time." "Brenda, you've apologized before." "No, Dad. Before, I was apologizing to try to get close to your money. Now I'm apologizing because I finally understand what you did here. It's something much bigger than I imagined." Howard stopped walking and looked into his daughter's eyes. "And what did you understand, Brenda?" "I understood that you didn't spend the money. You invested in eternity. All these children will carry this school's teachings to their families, to their communities, to their children. What you did here will last forever. Thank you for understanding, Brenda. Dad, I'd like Julia to be able to study here, not out of self-interest, but because I can see it's the best education I can give her." Howard looked at his granddaughter, who was watching the other children play with obvious interest. "Of course Julia can study here. She's my great-granddaughter and will always be welcome." "Julia, would you like to study at this school?" "Yes, great-grandpa. It looks like a lot of fun to learn by taking care of plants and animals." The reconciliation with Brenda was natural and sincere. There were no promises of inheritance or arguments about money, just the recognition that Howard had made the right choices, and Brenda's wish that her granddaughter benefit from the exceptional education her great-grandfather had created. In the following years, Brenda became one of the school's biggest supporters. Not as an administrator or business partner, but as the mother of a student and a volunteer in some activities. It was her way of making amends for years of misunderstanding and greed. Howard lived until he was 82, always active and involved in the school's activities. He died in his sleep on a spring morning after having spent the previous afternoon teaching planting techniques to a group of new students. His funeral was an event that left its mark on the entire region. Hundreds of former students, teachers, families who had been helped, and friends paid tribute to the man who had transformed their lives. Eleanor, now 84 years old, delivered the eulogy. Howard Miller won the lottery twice. The first time, he won $23 million. The second time, he won something priceless: the love and gratitude of hundreds of people whose lives he transformed. He could have used the money to live a comfortable, selfish life. He chose to use it to create something eternal. He could have taken revenge on the people who humiliated him. He chose to forgive and educate. He could have accumulated material wealth. He chose to accumulate human wealth. Today we say goodbye to Howard's body, but his soul remains alive in every child who studies at this school, in every alumnus who applies the values learned here, in every teacher who multiplies his methodology around the world. The Martha Miller Vocational Academy kept operating after Howard's death, now run by a board made up of former students, teachers, and community members. Eleanor continued as a board member until she was 90, when she finally retired. Sophie took over as the school's general director and led the expansion of the project to other continents. 10 years after Howard's death, the Martha Miller Vocational Academy methodology was being applied in more than 100 schools across 25 countries. Julia, Howard's great-granddaughter, graduated from the school at 18 and followed in her great-grandfather's footsteps. She earned a degree in education and took over one of the project's international branches, carrying forward the legacy of social transformation through education. The house where Howard lived was turned into a museum that tells the story of the humiliated farmer who became one of the greatest social educators of the 21st century. At the museum's entrance, a plaque summarizes his journey. Here lived Howard Miller, 1958-2040, the man who discovered that true wealth lies not in what you accumulate, but in what you share. Winner of the Grand New Year's jackpot in 2026, he used his entire fortune to create an educational system that transformed the lives of thousands of children on 5 continents. He proved that a single act of generosity can change the world. The National Trust Bank of Oak Valley, where Howard was humiliated in 2026, closed its doors in 2040. The building was purchased by the Martha Miller Foundation and turned into a teacher training center, an irony of history that Howard would have appreciated. The place where he was looked down on became a place that valued education and human dignity. Heather, the employee who laughed at him, tried to apply for a teaching position at the training center, but she was not accepted. At 65, she worked as a janitor at a public school and often told anyone who would listen about the day she humiliated the man who would become world famous. "I knew him before he became famous," she used to say. "He was just a poor old man who came into the bank with a crumpled lottery ticket." But no one was impressed by Heather's story anymore. Everyone in the area knew she had missed her chance to be part of the greatest social transformation the city had ever seen. Eleanor died at 93 in 2047, 21 years after the school began. Until her final days, she kept in touch with former students scattered around the world, followed the development of the international schools, and mentored new educators interested in the methodology. In her will, Eleanor left a letter addressed to all future generations of educators at the Martha Miller Vocational Academy. My dear future educators, I had the privilege of working alongside an extraordinary man in creating something that changed not only our lives, but the lives of thousands of children around the world. Howard taught me that education is not merely the transmission of knowledge, but the transformation of lives. That teaching is not just a profession, but a mission. That every child who passes through our hands is an opportunity to make the world a little better. Always keep alive the values on which this school was founded: honesty, responsibility, respect for nature, love of work, and solidarity with those in need. These values are more important than any subject in the curriculum. Remember, you are not just teachers, you are social transformers. Every child you educate can become an adult who makes a difference in the world. This is our greatest responsibility and our greatest privilege. With love and eternal gratitude, Eleanor Thatcher. In 2050, 24 years after the creation of the first school, the Howard Miller Global Institute was inaugurated, a university dedicated exclusively to training educators for rural areas. The university welcomed students from every continent and became a worldwide reference in transformative education. The institute was built on the land where Howard's old farm once stood, preserving the original house and maintaining the teaching crop areas. Pedagogy students from around the world came there to study the methodology that had revolutionized rural education. Sophie, at 57 years old, assumed the institute's presidency. In her inauguration speech, she summarized Howard's legacy. "My grandfather of the heart taught us that education is the only wealth no one can steal from us, that shared knowledge multiplies, that solid values are the best inheritance we can leave for future generations." Today, 64 years after his birth, hundreds of thousands of children on every continent study using the methodology he created. Millions of families have been directly or indirectly benefited by his educational project. Howard Miller proved that a single determined person truly can change the world, not through force or wealth, but through education and love for one's neighbor. The exact number of people benefited by the educational projects Howard created was never precisely calculated. But conservative estimates indicate that more than 500,000 children studied directly in schools that applied his methodology, and more than 2 million people were indirectly benefited through family members who received that education. Every alumnus of the Howard Miller schools became a multiplier of the values they learned. They became more mindful parents, more ethical workers, more responsible citizens. Many became community leaders, educators, social entrepreneurs, and honest politicians. Caleb, Loretta's son, who was one of the first students, became one of the world's leading experts in sustainable agriculture. He developed techniques that revolutionized agricultural production in arid regions of Africa and Asia, benefiting millions of farming families. Haley became one of the greatest references in rural pedagogy in Latin America. She wrote more than 20 books on transformative education and trained thousands of teachers in her methodology. Julia, Howard's great-granddaughter, led the expansion of the schools to Africa and Asia. At 40 years old, she was responsible for more than 200 educational units on those continents and had been nominated 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in social transformation through education. In 2076, 50 years after the creation of the first school, the United Nations declared January 6th as International Transformative Education Day in honor of the date Howard announced the creation of his school. The date became a global milestone for reflection on the role of education in social transformation and in building a fairer, more sustainable world. In every country where schools based on Howard's methodology existed, January 6th was celebrated with educational festivals, sustainability fairs, seminars on human values, and ceremonies honoring local educators. Howard Miller's story became required subject matter in the curriculum of schools that applied his methodology. Children around the world learned about the Brazilian farmer who turned humiliation into motivation, poverty into social prosperity, and individual wealth into a worldwide legacy. But the most important lesson his story taught was not about education or agriculture. It was about the human capacity to choose between selfishness and generosity, between revenge and forgiveness, between hoarding for oneself and building for everyone. Howard Miller died poor in money and rich in legacy. He left no material wealth to any heir, but he left an educational and moral legacy for all of humanity. His greatest riches were not the $23 million he won in the lottery, but the millions of lives he touched through his school. His greatest victory was not winning the grand New Year's jackpot, but proving that true luck lies in using the opportunities life gives us to do good. In 2080, 100 years after his death, an international survey was conducted to identify the 100 people who contributed the most to the progress of humanity in the 21st century. Howard Miller was ranked among the top 10, alongside scientists who cured diseases, inventors who revolutionized technology, and leaders who promoted world peace. The survey concluded that Howard's educational and social impact had been so profound and enduring that it surpassed seemingly more spectacular contributions. After all, curing a disease saves lives, but educating a child can save entire generations. In the survey's final report, the organizers wrote, "Howard Miller taught us that heroes are not only those who make great discoveries or lead revolutions. Heroes are also those who make simple but courageous choices, choosing generosity over selfishness, building over destroying, love over hate." His legacy proves that anyone, regardless of their background or social standing, can leave a positive and lasting mark on the world. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this moving story. Were you surprised by the twists? Did the ending move you? Leave your honest opinion in the comments about Howard's journey and whether you believe he made the right decisions. Your participation is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other incredible stories that will tug at your heartstrings.